The title of the book is Another Sort of Freedom, and it's a memoir. And my dear friend, he's a bit of a hero for me. He has agreed. We've got a copy. There we go. Lifesaver. So this is the book, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what is that other sort of freedom, and more things. Sudhir also wrote an autobiography, and I was very entertained by it. And when he agreed to come and converse with me, I was delighted. So Sudhir, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I share the pleasure of being with you and being able to talk about not only this book. You have written so many books of so many kinds, and I've led so many lives, in fact. So it's a pleasure to be with you. And maybe we could start on this book, for instance. I was wondering, of these 4 books of the Dharma part, the difficulty of being good. And I think my first question to you would be, what in your own life, what do you remember the difficulty of being good?
That's a very good question, and a tough question. When did I have a difficulty of being good? And I would say, yes, I'm in kindergarten, 4.5 years old. It is March of 1947, the year that we got our Azadi. And in my class, we all have a pencil box. I don't know if you remember, in those days, 2 annas it used to cost, a pencil box, 2 pencils and a rubber eraser. The kid who sits next to me in class, he doesn't have a pencil box. And he's a Muslim boy named Ayan. And he's always borrowing my pencils, and I don't like it. And so when it's recess one day, the kids go out of the class, teacher also goes out, and I'm the last one left. And there's a kid sits in front of me, ahead of me in class. He's the richest kid in our class. He's the only one who comes in a car to school. We all walk to school. He has 2 pencil boxes. One of them, red, shiny, made in England pencil box. And the other one is the arm pencil box that we all use. So I go to the rich kid's desk, I pick up 1 pencil box, and I put it on the desk of Ayan. When the class resumes, the rich kid screams, "Who stole my pencil box?" And the teacher gets worried. She's, after all, the richest kid in class. And everybody has to stand up, and she goes around asking each one, "Did you take the pencil box?" When it comes to Ayan's turn, he says, "Yes, there's a pencil box on my desk, but it's not mine, and I didn't put it there." And then it comes my turn. And my turn, I should have confessed that I was the one who put the pencil box there. But no, I'm frozen. I don't say anything. And then she goes around, and finally Ayan is the suspect, and he's being led to the front of the class to be punished. And he shouts at me. He says, "You know I didn't take it." why don't you say so? And I remain absolutely frozen. I don't say anything. And that is a story, Sudhir, of the difficulty of being good at the age of 4.5. And frankly, it's been a source of nightmare for me for many, many years. No, now I don't have nightmares. And I can't figure out. In a sense, it's very complicated. Through some kind of socialist instinct, I tried to equalize everybody's pencil boxes. But at the end, when it came time to rescue him, I didn't do it. And it's somewhat, I'm reminded that a few months later, this was March 47, August 47 is independence and partition. And we are in Lahore. This story is taking place in Lahore. And we are Hindus, and Lahore is going to Pakistan. So we have to run for our lives. And as we run, flee, we are waiting at the train station for the train to move. We are in the compartment, my family, my mother, my siblings, my father. And through the window, this is Jalandhar, by the way. We have crossed the border into India, but we still have to go far away. And through the window, we see a handsome policeman. He's Muslim. And two Sikh boys come and they stab him with their kirpan. And he falls down. And there's red blood. And my mother shuts the window at that point. And so these two incidents happened within months of each other. And all I can say is that what happened with me and Ayan was temporary insanity. That's the way I justify it. Temporary insanity at a human level. But what happened in the partition and the killing of this policeman, and those Sikhs shouted, Musalman, Musalman, when they did it. That was also an example of temporary insanity, but at a level of a nation, or at least of a state, Punjab. So all I can say is this story of the difficulty of being good takes place at two levels. At the public level, and ever since then I've been suspicious of religion, and certainly religion in politics. But all I can say is there's an absurdity about our lives. And this absurdity, whether it's temporary insanity or what, but they've been etched in my memory and they haven't gone away.
What I was very much impressed by in your memoir, in the autobiography, that it is a change. The change has been taking place. Earlier, most of the Indian autobiographies were full of just a biography of my vanities. How I was first in this, and then I was this, and then I was this position and this position. Nothing at all about the person. And nothing really shows about the person as a person than the difficulties and the ambivalences and the things which you could have done and not done, and the regrets. And this is a big change, and this is why I was very impressed by your Something else was your going to America as a child, and there are difficulties, something hurdles to be taken, and how you took them or not took them. Would you like to talk a little over those?
So this is the stories I've told you are at age between 4 and 5. Now we jump to age 13, and jump to age 13. My father is an engineer who's been transferred to Washington DC to negotiate with the Pakistan government the waters of the rivers of Punjab, so-called Indus Water Treaty. And the reason why Washington, because the World Bank is mediating, because the World Bank is planning to give money to both countries for irrigating the land of both sides. And the Pakistan government has sent 125 lawyers, and India has sent 3 engineers. And in the first meeting, the president of World Bank tells the Pakistanis, send these 125 lawyers away, bring 3 engineers, because we're going to sit down with the maps of every district where the water flows and divide it properly. And so while my father is dealing with all this, I am being admitted into a school, Theodore Roosevelt High School. And I'm put into the first year of high school. And they don't quite know which class to put me in. I was in modern school in Delhi and suddenly transported to Washington DC. But they put me in a class, and my mother quickly realizes that I'm way ahead of my class. Although by age, I'm at the same age as the other kids, but obviously modern school is a better school or whatever. Anyway, she goes to the principal to plead with him to give him a test and see where he fits in. And then, okay, so she says, all right, if you don't want to change his class, at least this class has 5 sections in which I am in. There are 2 college preparatory sections for kids who were supposed to go to college later in life. And there are 3 sections, what are called vocational sections, for people who will have factory jobs. So they put me into a vocational section. So the principal is a southern redneck, and he looks at the color of my skin and he says, welcome to America, son. In our country, colored boys are not supposed to get too big for their boots. That's what he says. And so basically he says, oh yes, and he says that if you don't get into trouble and you work hard, in 4 years you'll get a diploma, and with that diploma there are factory jobs opening all over in Virginia and Maryland, around the city, and you'll get a good factory job. And then he says, welcome to America. Well, my mother is upset, but she can't do anything. And so after a few days, she realizes I have to go to a class called shop. In shop, they teach you carpentry and other things that you do with your hands, fixing a radio and things like that. And she says, hi. She's a Punjabi middle class mother, and she's wondering that what she's trying to say is that in India, this sort of work is done not by our kind of people, high caste people, but by the OBCs. And so this incident makes me, because I've grown up in a sheltered middle class home, and caste in Punjab is not a daily in the face phenomena because it's a border province and it had a large Muslim and a Sikh population as well. So I discover caste in India, in America. However, and it's also racism in America is the other side of caste. But on a happier note, there's a girl in our school and she has liberal parents and she has a birthday party to which she invites me and other white kids and black kids in class. And so we go. I have never been invited to an American birthday party, and I'm very happy. And I eat a lot. They're lovely food. But after the eats, we all sit down on a ground, make a circle, and we play a game which was very popular amongst the teenagers at that time in America. It's called Spin the Bottle. Now, spin the bottle is basically the idea that you spin a bottle, and where the mouth of the bottle ends up, the person closest, the person of the opposite sex closest to the mouth of the bottle, you get a chance to kiss her. Or she gets a chance to kiss a boy. In any case, so the unwritten rule that day in this party was that black girls kissed black boys and white girls kissed white boys. But when it came to my turn, everybody's confused. So what am I going to do? But I find a good solution. And what is that solution? I kiss everyone. I kiss black girls, I kiss white girls, and I keep getting bonus points because I'm kissing all the time. So I become the champion of the game by the end of the evening. So this is a period in Washington, D.C., in America, before the civil rights movement, and before where you had colored toilets and white toilets. And I used to often get confused which one shall I go into, but I didn't want to take any chance, so I'd go into the colored one. But 4 years later, Sudhir, I graduated from school and I got my revenge against that principal. I got scholarships from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. And nobody in that principal's lifetime had done that. Admittedly, it was easier in those days to get those scholarships, but no one can. So there was a story in the Washington Post about page 5 or something about a boy from India who comes to America and does all this and so on. And the principal's reading the story and he calls me in to congratulate me. And he says, you made us proud, son, and welcome to America. Again, he says. And he says, you've achieved the American dream. And I felt like telling him that he had a different idea of the American dream for me 4 years ago, but I'm too much of a gentleman to do that. So that's the story, Sudhir.
That spin the bottle, I've played that game also, but at a later age and in a much stronger version than yours. But but we'll leave it at that.
You want to tell us about that?
No. No. So now, I think what impresses and what has drawn so many people are the changes you have made in your life. from all kinds of things, businessmen, and successful in all of them. Can you talk a little of how and why did you do that, changing from academia to business, business to writer, writer to, as they call it, the public intellectual?
Well, Sudhir, actually, my life, let me begin right in the beginning. My mother kept a diary, and that's why I was able to recall many things, even when I was a. So the first reference to me in that diary of my mother this was in Lailpur in Pakistan, what is now Faisalabad in Pakistan. By the way, Lailpur was named Lailpur because of Sir John Lyell, B.A. He used to always insist on putting B.A. after his name. And of course, the Saudis came and they bribed the Pakistanis. And anyway, that's another story. And that it's called after King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. Anyway, so the first reference to me is a few months after I'm born. And my mother writes, "This is a restless baby," in her diary. Then a year later, that restless baby now she's calling me a difficult child. He's become a difficult child. And then another year later, she is now decided, she's calling me a troublemaker. And by the time I go into this class in kindergarten in Lahore, the teacher is getting a little irritated with me, and because she thinks I'm asking too many questions or asking to do things that are not right. And so my name used to be Ashok Kumar, by the way, not Gurcharan Das, Ashok Kumar. And that's another story which I must tell you. But so what she does is she dubs me Nahi Kumar. From tomorrow, she says, you make me say Nahi, Nahi, Nahi all the time. You raise your hand, Nahi. Yeah, okay. Anyway, I used to be Nahi Kumar. So you can see this a certain trajectory of my life taking place, and so might as well tell the story. I must tell you how my name changed. Again, around the age of 4. My name was given to me by my mother and my grandmother. That is, my grandmother, my father's mother, suspected that she gave me that name because she thought my mother was secretly in love with a Bollywood actor named Ashok Kumar. So this wasn't right in my grandmother's eyes. So she took me to her guru and she placed me at his feet. And she said, Guruji anu na deo, give this boy a name. And the guru saw me at his feet and he said, well, let's call him Gurcharan Das. So overnight, at the age of 3.5 or 4, I am transformed from the Prince of Happiness, Ashok Kumar means Prince of Happiness, to the humble servant of the feet of the Guru. And some years later, when I'm grown up, I asked the Guru, why did you give me this name? And he smiles and he says, well, your grandmother put you at my feet and it was, easy, an easy one. But he's also said, it's good to remember humility, and your name can remind you of the importance of humility. Now so then he explained what he meant by humility, which is the best definition of humility I've ever heard. he, in one of his satsangs, he was saying that to take your work seriously, but not yourself seriously. He says that is humility. And I think when I talk about this another sort of freedom, this is related to that idea of self-forgetting. And so, anyway, we are carrying on. I haven't answered your question. But I had two influences in my life, my mother and my father. So it's coming back to that same class in kindergarten in Lahore. It's over. School's over by May. And I come home sporting a report card. And my mother sees me standing at the door and she asks, did you come first? And my father is standing nearby and he tells her that was the wrong question. You should be asking him. You should be asking him, what does he like in school? Does he like to draw? Does he like to hear stories? Who are his friends? And so really what I had were these two influences. My mother, good Punjabi, middle class mother, full of insecurities, telling me that I had to make a living one day and I better come first in class. And my father, much more relaxed. He was a mystic, an engineer, but a mystic who was concerned with making a life. So making a living, making a life were these two influences. And I grew up with this. And the next example of this, which is going to answer your question, Sudhir, is when I go to Harvard, before we are at, and this is a scene at Palam Airport. I'm going to take an Air India flight from Delhi to the US. And my mother has tears in her eyes. And she's, in between those tears, she's saying, now you better study something useful. You have to come home and make a living. And why don't you, by the way, become like your father? He's an engineer. You'll get a job in India. Engineers are needed. So I go to Harvard and I arrive there and my tutor said to fill out a form in which you have to declare a major, and I wrote engineering, but my tutor says there's a better school down the river called MIT. You'll get a better engineering degree. But I say I've got a scholarship to Harvard. I can't go to MIT, so we let it pass. But that evening, I've got the course catalog. And in that course catalog is a treasure house. It just blows my mind. You know, this is the magic of the American liberal education. You can take any course you want. It's not like here you have to go arts, commerce, and sciences or whatever. So first 2 years, you don't have to choose anything. So what do I study? Instead of engineering, I forget my mother's advice. I study Greek tragedy, the Russian novel. I study history of capitalism. I study Plato and Aristotle. I study Bauhaus architecture. I study Renaissance painting. I study Beethoven, music of Beethoven, and even Sanskrit love poetry. I take a course in Sanskrit love poetry. And when my mother finds out that he's at Harvard studying Sanskrit, she says, hi, Mrityu Bhasha, dead language. Only now the dead will give him a job. But my father reassures her that he's making a life through books, etc. But she's not convinced. Anyway, even Harvard gets worried, Sudhir, because I have to, it's junior year, middle of this third year, and I'm still flitting around like a honeybee on different flowers, settling on different flowers. And so the dean calls me and he says, now you got to declare a major. And so what will it be? And I said, philosophy. And he says, tell me, but why philosophy? I said, I want to learn about happiness. I want to be happy. He says, that's a good reason to study philosophy. And so I study philosophy. I get a degree in philosophy. I'm lucky that John Rawls has arrived at Harvard. I don't know if any of you know, but he's a big name. Went on to become a big name in political and moral philosophy in America and the world. Anyway, I graduate in philosophy. I'm then get a scholarship to do a PhD at Oxford. And as I'm back home, waiting to go to Oxford, and one evening I asked myself, do I really want to spend the rest of my life at that stratosphere of abstract thought? No. I want a life of action. So without telling my parents, I write a letter to Oxford that I'm not coming. And when my mother discovers this, her worst nightmare has come true, she has an unemployed, grown-up son at home. What we in Punjabi call a vela, idle. And we have a nosy neighbor in Chandigarh who comes to visit my mother, and they have coffee in the morning. And she always asks my mother, Thoda munda ki kar reha hai? What is your son doing? And my mother gets embarrassed. And I see her embarrassment and I feel very sad. And so I answer the first advertisement in the newspaper that I find. We get the Tribune in Chandigarh, and there's an ad for a wanted ad for trainees by a company that makes Vicks Vapor Rub. So I don't know anything about business, but I guess they get impressed with my Harvard degree and they hire me. And so I, from a high thinking Brahmin, I've suddenly become a money grabbing banya in the bazaar, and from the ivy covered halls at Harvard, I'm transported into the dusty bazaars of India. You know, going from retailer to retailer, ek dozen ek free, ek dozen ek free. You know, kitna leoge? Anyway, I think of it as, you know, what to do, and I mean, I was, I kind of like the rough and tumble of the business life. And so it's a bit like the man who came to dinner. I stay on. And I just want to narrate, if Sudhir, one story, because this story will also help in answering your question. I know this is a long answer. One year, there's a flu in India. And we sell a hell of a lot of Vicks Vapor Rub. Now this is the time of the license Raj. And so what happens is that we are celebrating, of course, in the eyes of our headquarters in New York. We are heroes. We have sold more than any other country that year. And but we get a summons from Delhi. In fact, the day we are celebrating, the company lawyer brings the summons, which is saying that we have broken the law. And what is the law? We were only supposed to make so many tons of Vicks vapor rub, and we have exceeded it by 30%. And the penalty for breaking the law, violating the law, is 3 years in jail. And so I am supposed to go to Delhi to explain. Now in the office, I go, there's a joint secretary in Delhi who's a very arrogant man, a leftist. He keeps us waiting for 2 hours, cooling our heels. And then we are let into his office. And he keeps reading the newspaper while we are sitting waiting for him. We meaning there are 2 lawyers with me. And they are shivering. And so the fellow says, "Kya?" He puts down his paper and says, "Kya?" And I said, "Sir, you have called us. You tell us, kya?" And he says, no, I haven't read your file. What is the problem? So I show him the summons. He says, "So you've broken the law." And so I explained that there was a flu. We thought we were producing for the country. Millions of children, parents were helped during an epidemic in this case. And that's the reason why we sold more. And we just thought our duty was to keep the store shelves stocked of the chemist shops. And he says loudly, "But you have broken the law." And then he says, "All you chaps in the private sector are crooks. And I want to make an example of your case. And so now the law will take its own course." So suddenly I realized 3 years in jail. And as we are going out of his office, Sudhir, I don't know what gets into me, but I turn around and I'm coming out of the door, and I turn around and I say, "Sir, this news will get out. We are an American multinational. It will be reported in the New York Times, Washington Post, London, all over in India as well. And what do you think? What do you think people will say about our country? That here was a company that produced something that was helpful to people and helped millions of people, and as a result you sent the executive of the company to jail." And he says, "Are you threatening me?" And I said, "No, the fact is the news will get out. I don't have to be the person who leaks the news. And I say, well, how do you think our Prime Minister will look to the world? And how will you face yourself?" And he says, "Jao," mean get out of my office. And of course I get a lot of sleepless nights after that. And the lawyers are angry with me because they said you should have fallen at his feet and begged for mercy. Instead you were defying him. Anyway, the long and short of the story is that the government dropped the inquiry after a while. Things quietened down. But for those of you who did not work during the license Raj, this was the lunacy, the absurdity of working. We've talked about some absurdities, the iron story, the partition story, but this is also the kind of thing. And I don't think there was any country in the world which had this kind of, because we were not a fully communist country. We had a command economy, but we didn't have economic freedom, but we had political freedom. Anyway, so this is an aside. This is not illustrating your answer to your question. What your question really is that then let's move fast forward. I'm in my 40s now. I've become head of the company in India, then Asia, and then now I'm at the world headquarters. And the reforms in India have taken place in 91. I'm talking about 93, 2 years later. And some of you who may remember this, that Narasimha Rao, who is the father of the reforms, and Manmohan Singh, Narasimha Rao was a target of the left wing of the Congress party. And there was a serious worry that the reforms might get reversed, because the Congress party was, the majority was left wing. And there was also this feeling that what is Narasimha Rao doing as Prime Minister when Sonia Gandhi should be the Prime Minister? There was that feeling also. Anyway, I was at that time at the world headquarters. I heard about this, Sudhir. I was driving to work one day, and on the radio, National Public Radio, NPR, you know NPR, and they had an interview and a story about India, which was precisely about this, that the left that the reforms might be reversed. And for me, frankly, we got our real freedom in 91, not in 47. We promptly lost our freedom after the second five-year plan in the 50s. And so I was very disturbed. I was head of global strategy, and what time is it? It's okay. So I was very disturbed. I went into a meeting. By the way, all this is in the book. I went into a meeting at the world headquarters, a global meeting of Pampers, the baby diapers that P&G, our company, produced. And I mean, a very good product, but at that particular moment, each country is talking about their Pampers business in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America. And I'm thinking, what am I doing in this meeting talking about Pampers when the reforms in India are in trouble, and reforms are the only hope for the poor in the country? Anyway, that's the trigger which finally I sent off a telegram to Manmohan Singh. Luckily, I knew him because I'd been head of P&G and I had met him, and so I told him, I said, why isn't anybody defending the reforms? Margaret Thatcher used to say she spent 20% of time doing the reforms and 80% defending them. And even Deng Xiaoping in communist China used to talk about selling the market to the people. And here we were doing reforms chupke at night, stealthily, and nobody really defended the reforms. Anyway, I was very worried. So the answer came from Manmohan Singh that you come back and you sell the reforms, because we obviously can't do it. Or something, he didn't say quite that, but he put it in so many words. So that's when I quit my corporate job, and my wife was a good sport. I mean, really good sport, because she knew that from next month there'd be no salary check. And also, that's, I'd reached the point in that company where you have big money coming in, and I was not even, it was 50. The retirement age was 65. So, but she was a good sport. We came back to India, and I set myself up as a writer, starting those columns. For 25 years, I wrote a column for the Times of India, and at one time it used to be weekly, then bi-weekly, and now monthly. And basically, a lot of them was to make Indians comfortable with the market and with the reforms. And so that's kind of the trigger why at Harvard I quit. I left a promising academic career, and I left a promising business career to end up as a writer in back home.
You haven't ended up, but okay. I was reading the book, and I think I wrote to you, or maybe not. I was probably going in my own mind from my own profession of what is the inside of the person, not the outside of opportunities coming, but the ability to take these kind of decisions which you did. I leave when I'm the head of Procter & Gamble. No, I leave this. I leave the academic Oxford, etc. And you mention it very much in the book. Is your mother's. So someone who has been incontestably favorite child of the mother, and I've seen it often, one knows it, gets a feeling of being a victor, that of a feeling of lifelong success, that I'm never going to fail in any case, and which sometimes in the reality fits that. So it was making the reality fitting from the inside feeling, I'm never going to fail, I'm going to be a success, because of the mother saying all the time, you were saying the troublesome, etc., but she's admiring the energy. Look at him, look at my boy. And you say it in the book. You don't stress it enough, which I'm stressing for you here, when there's a child starts walking, mother will say, he will go far. Or the anxious mother will say, he will go too far, he might fall. You had a mother, he will go far. And I think that is for me, was one of the motor of the changes, which I'm seeing. Of course, then the opportunities come, but that you take advantage of the opportunities and the thing. And the second thing which you were just saying was the beginning of the name change. Gurcharan Das and the humility, and Ashok Kumar, actor, vanity. And you have been struggling with that all your life too. And you are very aware in this book, not earlier as much, of how to deal with my vanity, which also comes from the mother part of it. A mother who probably does not fill her own potentialities, which have been transferred to the son. He will fulfill it. And I was very impressed by your struggle of your vanities. Would you like to talk a little about those?
Well, it's going to the title of the book, Another Sort of Freedom. And what is that other sort of freedom? And you're absolutely right. It's a work in progress even today. That I think all these incidents that I've narrated, whether it's with Iron, the pencil box, or quitting at the top of my career, and so on, I think that, when I left the corporate world to become a writer, I actually believed that I would also become a better person. And Now, 25, 30 years later, I can say I failed. I still, the vanity is there. You know, I go to a bookshop. We have near my house, Khan Market, Bahri and Sons books. And the other day, I walked in, and he's a friend of mine, the guy, Bahri. And I said, hey, what the hell? You haven't got my book in the window. You know I'm important, kind of thing. I didn't put it quite that way. But you understand my point. The vanity, I mean, why shouldn't my book be in the window? You know, was my question. And then when he put it there, I said, no, in front. Why don't you put it in front? Why am I behind Ruskin Bond? And so you see how in small ways all that persists, vanity. And what I realized, and one of the parallel story, which I haven't told at all, and we won't go through that, but right from the beginning, you know, I mean, at 3 I learned how to run, and I've been running ever since. And the fact is that we are all guided by expectations. There was the expectations of my mother, and then the expectations of my father, which were different. But also we have expectations of our friends, our colleagues, of society. But I think the most serious ones are those of ourselves, of our ego. And the ego is telling us, you've got to be somebody, you can't be a nobody, you know? And that's the source of vanity, envy, status anxiety. Why is Ruskin Bond more important than me? That's the status anxiety. And so that struggle is partly the story of what keeps this book going. And it doesn't put me in a good light many times. But what I'm trying to suggest to you is that it's a universal problem.
Yeah.
Universal problem. And you know, all of us, I think, all human beings, and the origin actually of the search in religion, some people turn to religion, but the search for all of us is there. For some it's more more apparent and more immediate. And so when I said that I thought I would become a better human being, and I did not, I also realized something else, because I had been a business person and I had also been a writer. And I have concluded, let me get up and say this, I have concluded that actually a business person is a better human being than a writer or an artist. And why do I say that? Because a business person depends on others. A business person has customers, and he has to satisfy his customers. A business person has suppliers. Now everybody has a temptation to squeeze the supplier, you know, give me a little bit lower price. But if you go too far, you'll get hurt, because the supplier will give you an unsatisfactory component. Anyway, business people have employees. You can't do everything yourself. Now you've got to respect your employees. Temptation is, ye lao, wo karo, you know, treat them like. But smart businessmen know that if a good person leaves you and joins your competitor, you'll be the one who'll get hurt. So you have to respect your employees. So from day number one, business people, even Ratan Tata bows down to his customers. Business people understand this interdependence of things. That for a business transaction to go through, both the buyer and the supplier, the seller and the buyer have to be, the price has to be right. And then it goes through. So therefore I've concluded, and that's why I think Delhi people, Bombay people are nicer than Delhi people. Bombay people are business people. Delhi people are feudal. Feudal meaning it's government, one emperor, one king, now one prime minister, everybody else bowing down. One hierarchy. In Bombay, you have lakhs of CEOs. In Delhi, you have only one CEO, PM, the Prime Minister. And our current Prime Minister will always make sure that he reminds you of that. So therefore, this is why the best thing that's happened to Delhi is Gurgaon. Gurgaon is a commercial city. And finally, Gurgaon, apartments, Delhi people say, oh my God, this is how they live. So they're realizing there's some suddenly sobering reality hitting those Delhi 3, Khan Market, Lutyens Delhi people. And so this is actually when we talk about another sort of freedom, I think we're talking about what my guru, the guru, my grandmother's guru was talking about, to take your work seriously but not yourself seriously. So if you can really get absorbed in what you're doing, you tend to forget yourself. And when my writing is going well, I just totally forget. And that's why in the mornings I never do email. From 6 to 12 I write. And at 5:45 I'm pulled from my bedroom like a magnet to my study. And suddenly I open the computer and keys start clicking. I don't know who's clicking them. And the writing starts appearing. And I'm not even there. It's a bit like Tendulkar and his famous double century. You know, the last one before he retired. And a reporter asked Tendulkar, how did it feel like approaching that double century? And Tendulkar says, I don't know. I wasn't even there. All I know is the bat had become so big and the ball had become so big that the bat just had to hit the ball. Now, athletes call that being in the zone. And that is self-forgetting. And that's the other sort of freedom. To be able to forget yourself, that diminish your ego a little bit, so that, and it's the secret of happiness and a flourishing life.
I completely agree with you about business people and artists. I taught for 20 years in INSEAD, a course, a seminar for top management. And it was very clear that they have to know the others. Unless you inherit the company, people who come into a company to come up, they have to know the other people much, much more and go towards their wishes, how to fulfill them. So they are psychologically much more sensitive than artists or writers who are mostly the vanities. So when I was saying vanities, you don't have a problem. That is a healthy narcissism. But many writers and artists have the kind of narcissism which is, I would say, flaming egotists, like the one who's talking to someone, I'm this, I did this, and then, let's stop talking about myself. Now, you talk. What do you think of me? So those are not the ones kind of. So I completely agree with you on that part of it. I don't think we have, I don't know, too much time.
Yeah.
I would like to know from you, this book, Another Sort of Freedom, I think somewhere you said in your 4 Purusharthas that this is the moksha part of it.
Correct.
I would imagine the moksha part is secular immortality. You're hinting towards, and I think that's what you call another sort of freedom, secular immortality. What kind of immortality you think, what would be your legacy? What would you like to be your legacy?
My legacy, oh God.
And don't be modest now, I mean.
No.
You get your
No, I have plenty of ego and plenty of vanity, no fear of modesty here. Sudhir, I haven't really thought of it. I know that a lot of people did get influenced by my Times of India column that used to come on Sundays, in which I relentlessly tried to talk about relentlessly made people cautious about the government, power of the government, and also told them the difference between being pro-market and pro-business. You know, that's a very important distinction. And that's one thing, and that India Unbound was a culmination of that sort of process as well. But if you ask me, what I would have liked to have made my legacy, I think I would have liked to have been a better human being. Meaning somebody who's more caring and doing things for others. Now, in a sense, when I talk like this, my wife says, but your books, people will read your books. That is good enough, caring for others. I said, but those I wrote for myself. And she said, no, they are for everyone. Anyway, so I'm not sure I'm answering your question, Sudhir, very well. Maybe I should ask you the question. But I can only say this, Sudhir, that this is, now that I've written this memoir, I've learnt a few things. And one of the things I've learnt is when you write, by the way, there's a difference between a memoir and an autobiography. So maybe this is a good place to start to define the difference. Autobiography is a chronological account of your life. I was born here, I went to school here, I went to college there, I had lunch there, and you know, a boring recitation of your life. A memoir is selective. And a memoir you choose, you find in your life a theme that runs through it. So a theme can guide the selection, or it can be a period of your life that you talk about. But in my case, as I thought back on my life, you know, when you write a memoir, you relive your life. And by the way, a secret I have learnt: reliving your life is better than living it. And why? Because you can play God. You decide what happened to you. You choose those events, and then actually in the process you connect dots. In fact, you know, it is really ultimately a work of fiction. Every memoir, every autobiography is really a work of fiction. And that's why they say, who was it, that American humorist, Mark Twain, said somewhere that, there's no difference between fiction and non-fiction. The only difference is that fiction has to make sense. Anyway, the other tip that I would give you, if any one of you wants to write, and I would recommend it, write a memoir, is relive your life, is that make sure that you don't just select the best parts of your life. Because if you're looking too good all the time, the reader will say, the pompous ass. Many hagiographies are like that. If, on the other hand, you make the opposite mistake and you try to put in too many things bad about you, people say, oh my God, why should I read him? He's a loser. So you don't want to be a pompous ass, you don't want to be a loser. So it's best to be yourself. Be yourself, have the good and the bad. But what a memoir does is that it makes you connect the dots. So I wasn't aware that my life had been a struggle for another sort of freedom until I started connecting the dots and the crazy events that happened in my life. And so, there you are.
Mm-hmm. Question and answer.
I think we have questions, people getting up.
I want to ask now, you've been saying that you've been, doing good for customers, for readers, and so is it better to do good or be good?
Well, that's a real philosophical question. Is it better to...
Meaning, why are you bothering so much about being good and questioning that?
Yeah.
If you have done, which obviously you have, done such a lot of good with customers and readers.
Yeah. Well, I understand you. I think it's a very profound question, and frankly, no one's ever asked me that particular question before. So this is one I'm grateful to you to pointing it out. That I think where I have failed is that I've seen people. I know at least one human being who actually is good, meaning is being good, because the first reaction of that person in his language would be not narcissistic. He's a sort of person you come to him for help and he'll take the trouble to help you out. And all his life he's been defined by this very quiet attitude. No big deal, no big philanthropy or anything like that. It's not doing good, not giving away money to these people. That's good too. But I think in the process, that person, I would call that person an other-directed person. And whereas I and most of us are self-directed, inner-directed instead of other-directed. And so that would be my ambition, to have been that sort of person, because I truly admire this guy. I mean, he's lived his life like a real prince. I mean, he's an anonymous person, but boy, if you need help, he's the one I would go to. What do you think?
Well, Gandhi had one answer, and which was very clearly doing good. He says that when people come to my ashram, they see all the things, etc. They think I am very good, etc. But that is not the thing. How the ashram has become, whether they are doing good, whether they are it, that would see
the results.
Yeah. So being good, and he always doubted whether he was good. No, he had lots of problems. So he said being good is not the thing. That doing good is what will define me and people will think, otherwise it's no use. So that's one answer. I mean, Gandhi doesn't have to be right, but that is
Right.
one answer.
Yeah.
That doing good is the
Yeah,
answer.
and this is of course the classic problem of consequentialism versus the deontological versus in philosophy. I'll illustrate this point with a little story from Goa, which is a few years ago, a child was drowning on, I think, Baga Beach in Goa. I think it was Baga Beach. And somebody jumped in to the sea and saved this, a boy jumped in and saved this child. And the reporter from Times of India, because that's where I read the story, reporter asks him, "You're a hero. Why did you do it?" And he very sheepishly says, "I was trying to impress a girl in our college party. We have come from a college and I thought she would get impressed." And then, so she says to him, "But then you're not a hero." But reading the story, I said, "But the child was saved. That's the good deed, it was done. So why are you worried about his motives? It's the act, this child was saved." Anyway, so there are many ways to judge goodness. And any other questions? Anyone else?